Here we go.
And we'll start with the third step prayer, which is on page 63 of your big book. And I am Rob K., recovered alcoholic. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Rob. All right, we are on page XXX of the doctor's opinion, and we're down towards the bottom. Let's
back it up a paragraph.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, you got it. Page XXX, everybody.
Actually, let's go ahead and that's good. One.
Okay. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence.
Yeah, and entire abstinence. I think that's a scary phrase, a scary sentence, especially for newcomers, because they're looking at it kind of as, oh my gosh, what does that mean? And I'm never going to drink again, especially for the younger newcomers. So I think that this is one of those things that you, as a sponsor, you want to stop and you want to really kind of talk about, because when we talk about complete abstinence, we really do mean that. But it's not like it's not like you're going to find yourself alone and without support and without the ability to do this based on what you're trying to do. And remember, if we're talking to a newcomer, whether they're young or old at this point, and they're just now getting into the book, they haven't yet really done a real step 1, 2, or 3, that type of thing. So this is a statement that I think that you should qualify at this point in time. The idea here is that we're going to get you there. You might be cold turkey right now. You might be white knuckling it at this point. You might be actually stopped drinking, and maybe you never do take another drink, which would be great. But the point being is that we're probably at a very fragile moment in somebody's their recovery, and it's really kind of a statement that needs to be kind of qualified, and there needs to be some real support given from the standpoint that the person's not alone, as far as that's concerned. And yes, we are talking about developing the phenomenon of craving, that ability, or that inability to stop drinking after you've started, and that type of thing, and with that allergy. So they should be able to relate to that and feel the pull and the kind of the fear of having that kind of happen to them. But then that complete abstinence statement just really jumps up, and I think it just kind of has to be really qualified and explained. Rob?
You got it. Remember, the only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. So we have no program of moderation. You can't take any alcohol whatsoever into our system without creating the phenomenon of craving. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be the most chronic alcoholics are doomed.
Yeah, and it's kind of like this debate, this talk, there's another one of those kind of powerful statements here. And when we mean doomed, we mean that there's going to be an alcoholic death if you continue to drink, and as an alcoholic, you're going to die if you don't get this. And so that's an important statement to make at this point. And I think that kind of underlines and punctuates the seriousness of what we're talking about. Rob?
Yeah, and remember, this is one of the #1 doctors that are saying that we are doomed if we continue the way we're going. Page XXXI, everybody, right at the top. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed, no return to alcohol.
Yes, a long time. We are talking about Hank Parkhurst here, and his story, which was in the first edition, is the non-believer, and this is something that he contributed. Not that he didn't contribute a lot, and we'll talk about that for just a second. But he contributed the chapter to employers, which we covered quite nicely yesterday in Bill S's big book study yesterday and on Friday. So Hank Parkhurst was largely responsible for the book. He's the one that pushed and motivated and nudged Bill W. to write the book. He unfortunately he was a go-getter and one of those people that was very influential. He's the one that set up a lot of purchasing stock in order to pay for the book. So he's largely he's kind of not really talked about, but without Hank Parkhurst, we wouldn't have the book, and we might not be here today talking in this regard, because it just probably wouldn't have happened. But fortunately, about 4 years into his recovery, Hank Parkhurst went back out and started drinking again, and that was that. So unfortunately, we couldn't really call him one of the quote founders of the program and of the book, etc., if we didn't have him be successful from that point on. Rob?
Yeah, the forgotten man of AA, Hank Parkhurst. If it wasn't for Hank, we would not have this book. He pushed Bill to get this book done. And, as I say, if it was up to Bill, he would have, written a few pages, stuck it in a drawer, and forgot all about it. But, Hank kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. Bill, I need this. I need that. I need this chapter. I need that chapter. Come on, let's get it done. If Hank had not gone out drinking, he would be so well known that, but unfortunately, resentment got the best of Hank, and he went back out drinking just after the book was published. So it's a sad story, but, when they talk about resentments will kill you, well, Jason just put in the chat, Hank Parkhurst initials are HP. Interesting. That is, I've never put that together, but that is interesting. Hank Parkhurst, higher power. Oh, well. We're on page XXXI, everybody. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and, in desperate condition, brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink.
Yep, and this person that we're talking about is Fitz Mayo, and his story is on page 208, and that is currently in the book. It's Our Southern Friend, and he also was one of the people that was instrumental in helping to expand AA into other parts of the United States. So very proactive and supportive individual. His name is Fitz Mayo. Rob?
Yeah, Fitz, he was quite the character. He came from a religious background, and similar to Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob, when he was a young child, was made to go to church all the time. Well, so was Fitz Mayo. When they got older, they obviously, they had enough of religion and sort of tried to turn their back on it, only to find out that later on they would need it. So Fitz, as I say, he is further on in the book. He's the one that from his hospital bed fell to his knees and said, if there is a God, here I am. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and in desperate condition brought to me. I've read this already, didn't I?
Yes, you did, Rob. That's
I
okay.
apologize, everybody. You know what? God must have wanted me to read that again. I apologize. His alcohol, I'm going to go to where I should be. His alcohol problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. And we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray.
Yep. So this is the doctor's opinion. We're talking that this last paragraph or so that Rob is reading is really kind of steps 4 and 5, if you kind of look at it from that standpoint. So we're introducing those without really calling them out as steps 4 and 5, but I do want to punctuate this with that. That's what it was. And this particular paragraph as a whole is one of the most read paragraphs by those that actually use the book as part of their recovery. Remember, a lot of people start at page 1, which is what we're about to get started on with Bill's story. But nonetheless, the beginning of the book, as you can see, is just as important, if not more important, for people to understand the allergy and the malady, to understand the ideas that are of a physician, and to reinforce to everyone that this program has a lot of history, and we're a lot that is involved in the book itself, as far as the contents and where to really begin. Okay, so the book, we're going to get started here on Bill's story. We'll talk a little bit about Bill as we go along. The book, just so you know, kind of as in the beginning here for chapter 1 and going forward and stuff, where Bill was, the book was edited by Tom Uzzell. That's Uzzell. And he is the one that moved Bill's story up to chapter 1. It was in a different place when they were first actually writing the book. And we'll talk a little bit more about Bill W. as we kind of go along here. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, I just want to go back just a little bit. They talked about moral psychology. What moral psychology is changing the way we think. And the doctors knew that they needed to change the way these certain alcoholics think. They were very selfish and self-centered. Dr. Young talks about it also, in that they need a vital psychic change. Both men knew that they had to do a change in the way we think, okay, the chronic alcoholic. Because what was happening is that they were coming into the treatment center and, they would get the alcohol out of their system. They would go out, and within a very, very short period of time, they would be back in. Now, Towns Hospital was not a cheap place to go to. Okay, it was for relatively rich people. Bill Wilson was not a rich person, but he had a brother who was a doctor, who I guess had a few dollars and could afford to send him to Towns Hospital. But Dr. Silkworth, saw these people coming in and out and knew that they had to have a change. But getting the change through to these people, how do we do it? That is the hard part. And that's what Dr. Silkworth, worked on. It wasn't until, they're going to talk about Bill's treatment the third time. Dr. Silkworth sees him. And Dr. Silkworth saw a change in Bill. He didn't know exactly what it was, but that's why he let him work with other alcoholics. So let's get into Bill's story. I hope, Jenny, that helps you with moral psychology. Moral psychology is basically change in our mind. Bill's story, chapter 1, page number 1. Bill's story. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. It was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol.
Okay, so a little bit about Bill in this beginning. He was inducted into the Army on May of 1917. He was artillery, and when he basically did join the military, we're talking too about part of his life. He had discovered liquor, which was known as the Bronx cocktail. It's a martini with orange juice. One of the things too that's not really talked about here is that in January 24th of 1918, Bill married Lois before he left for Europe, which this is about that time, just a little bit after that, as he was getting ready to go overseas into Europe for the war. Rob?
Yep. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot.
Yeah, this is an ominous warning which he failed to heed. The grenadier is known as a special soldier, and the drinking cold small beer. A small beer was a beer of low alcohol content. So there was quite a bit of beer drunk by this individual. And this was on May 12th. The Bill met Dr. Bob on May 12th, and the year and the time on the tombstone was May 12th of 1764. Although obviously Bill wasn't around at that point in time, but May 12th is the same date that Bill met Bob, and that this tombstone or this person passed away. And we're talking about Winchester Cathedral. That is an important thing that he was there. Well, Rob?
Yeah, Thomas Fletcher, died by pot, which is small beer, as Leo said. It has 1 to 2% of alcohol, so the water has got an awful lot of bacteria in it. You get dysentery, and you actually poop yourself to death, basically, because they didn't have any way of stopping it. Ominous warnings, which I failed to heed. 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance.
Yep, they had given him a pocket watch, which was kind of neat at the time, for his contributions to the unit, and he had come back successful. Obviously, he came back alive, and that was in and of itself a success.
Yep.
That was giving him some encouragement, and at the same time some confidence that he was going to be able to branch out and do quite well in business. Rob?
Yeah, Bill certainly did not was not shy on having confidence in his own abilities, which is going to keep him in good stead and also be his downfall. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I'd proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived.
Yeah. And so I underlined this. I'd proved to the world that I was important. Again, there was an overabundance of confidence going into his new life and business. The work took him to Wall Street. I think that there's talked about studying economics and business as well as law. He went to the Brooklyn Law School, and when he said he nearly failed his law course, that certainly came true. Was true that he nearly failed. I think it's a curious word that they use here, potential alcoholic that I was. It's a just, to me, I highlighted that word, and it's just one that I sit down and think back of my own becoming alcoholic, and when and how that kind of progressed and took hold. But just as a curious word to me that he uses here. And at the bottom of this paragraph, where he's talking to Lois and telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived, is a form of rationalizing, and we've all been there. So just want to highlight that this is a point in time where Bill is trying to rationalize his drinking and reinforce it with what we actually know to be true, and that is that's false. That you don't derive your best ideas necessarily when you're drunk. Rob?
No, but the drunk thinks he's come up with the greatest idea in the world. By the time I had completed the course, well, I just want to say one thing, is that we had long talks, and when I was still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk. Though his drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed his wife. Fraught the emotional appeal. She's talking to him. How often have we been talked to and say, don't you think you need to settle down a little bit? And we just push people aside. No, I got this. And as a friend of ours from the Miami meeting always says, I got this. I got this disease. By the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge a weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. It went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rarely imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on.
Yeah, this is a great chapter in Bill's life, Bill and Lois, and what they did to study companies and organizations that they might decide to invest in. That's about to come up. That they say that they saved $1,000 back then. That's the equivalent of about $15,000 today. So quite a sum of money to invest into certain stocks that Bill thought were destined to do well. This statement of, out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. So he, sets out to drink and come up with these great ideas. He's able to hold down a job, save enough money to invest a pretty good sum of money, especially at the time, into stocks. And then at the same time, he's got this idea that he's going to go out and study companies, which it's much easier to do today since we have the internet. So you can imagine how long this took and how much effort had to go into going to these different companies and these organizations and try to find out whether or not they're destined to do well or not. Rob?
We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle, the sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of financial reference service. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success at speculation, so we had a little money, but we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year.
Yeah, we're talking about them going around on an old Army surplus Harley Davidson. Those were basically rattled your teeth bucket motorcycles. The other thing that we want to kind of share with you is Ella Goldfoot Farm in New York is the farm that they worked on for a month, and he does make a reference to the fact that this is the last honest work that he did for quite some time as far as manual labor is concerned. They did, in fact, get to be successful with covering the eastern part of the United States. He did use that time to an effort to get him a position there, and for that year, he did quite well. And if things had remained the same, you can only imagine it to what could have happened or would have happened with Bill going forward. Rob?
Yeah, Bill and Lois were paid $75 a month for both. Lois to do the housework and Bill to milk and work the fields. Bill must have loved that hard labor, mucking up the stables and everything like that. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boon of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair-weathered friends.
Yeah, so he had arrived. Obviously, things are going in his favor at this point in time. And for the next few years, fortune, money, and applause my way. And so he was a very popular person. And I think it's also worth noting that Bill was actually a very charismatic guy and somebody that was very likable. So you could, find yourself wanting to be around Bill and Bill wanting to be around you as long as things were, on the up and up as far as that goes. His judgment and his ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. So, from a stock standpoint, he was doing incredibly well, and we've noted that. And it also, they make reference to the drink, was taking an important and exhilarating part of his life. There was probably a constant flow of alcohol at this point in time, and one where he was young enough and healthy enough and probably still in that mode of where you're drinking, but you're still able to kind of hold down a job and continue to function. We might refer that to a high functioning alcoholic, although I think that's a misnomer when we really kind of get down and looking at it. But he does make a point here, a reference, kind of foreboding. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. So things were going well. The drinks were flowing. He was probably buying people drinks, and so throwing money at the bars down on the bar for people to use to drink. So with that, he attracted a lot of people that we'll find, and we've all been there, where as long as the alcohol is flowing, they're there. As soon as the alcohol dries up, they're nowhere to be found. So this fair weather friend reference is quite interesting point in time in Bill's life. Rob?
Yep, Bill is doing well financially. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boon of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drinking was taking an important and exhilarating part. I've read this too, didn't I? I am not doing well today, gentlemen and ladies. I do apologize. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrations of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes.
Yeah, the apartment that we're talking about is on 38th and Livingston in New York, and his drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. I would gather to say that it was, quite constant, that Bill was under the influence. I think of the show Mad Men, with those guys drinking throughout the day, while they're working, and then obviously they were drinking at night. So I can only imagine that this was something to that kind of level with regard to men and sitting around with in suits and ties and just drinking while they were carrying on with with business and that type of thing. The remonstrance, as I'm going to say that wrong, remonstrances of my friends. This is the disapproval is what that means. Terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. So things had changed for Bob. I'm sorry, things had changed for Bill. And in that regard, people had started to disapprove of his constant drinking, and it was a turnoff for them, and they started to leave his side. Obviously, I think his attitude probably changed as well. And again, now he's starting to become this singular person that's drinking alone, which I can attest that happened to me. Even if I was around somebody else, I would be the only one really drinking, and that was problematic. Rob?
In 1929, I contracted Gulf fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud, while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Gulf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to caroom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism.
Yeah, the Walter Hagen is at the time was the number 3 rated golfer. Obviously, Bill, is just looking at him as kind of an idol. And but liquor caught up to him, Bill, much faster than he came up behind Walter. He started to become jittery and having those withdrawal symptoms in the morning that we all can probably raise our hand to a person and say that we experienced. The golf was another outlet for drinking. This exclusive course that he was talking about was the Equinox Country Club. And it was one that had Lincoln's son as a member, Robert Todd Lincoln. And we're talking, of course, about a lot of checks going in and out of this till, a lot of money being spent at the golf course to support Bill's habit of drinking. So,
Leo, there was one other member of that course that plays an important part. Ebby Thatcher's older brother was also a member. and
Oh,
was a
okay.
member of Robert Todd Lincoln's foursome, which I found quite interesting personally. It's amazing how everything intertwines. Abruptly in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of these days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ minus 32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back.
Yeah. So Bill isn't going to give up. He's going to use this stock market crash as a reason to continue to drink instead of, in fact, you know, and for very good, he didn't jump, and obviously that was disgusting for him. But I do want to note that he capitalizes high finance, which I would just surmise that this was Bill's higher power at the time, and so I think it's a curious reference to that. But he's gonna keep trying. Rob?
One of the things that I find fascinating about this is that, men were jumping to their death, and it disgusted Bill. But in the next couple of pages, we're going to find out that, Bill gets to the same jumping off point, which I found interesting.
Yep.
Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time, we stayed broke.
Yeah. So we're talking about Dick Johnson and the company that Dick was running was called Green Shield and Company. And he is he came up the Christmas of 1929. And so we're talking about the spring of 1930 is when things kind of returned back nice for Bill and Lois. But unfortunately, drinking caught up with him again, and he had to be let go. He was basically fired from his job, and at this point, they stayed broke. Bob?
Yep. We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years, or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk.
Yep. And we're talking about a couple of things here. The fact is, Bill actually never really started this job. He was on his way to work when he got into a fight with the taxi driver. And we're also talking about Lois kind of finding work at Macy's department store is where she went to work and stayed there for quite some time. But at this point in time, Bill is not working. He's basically staying home and he's drinking, and he's non-functioning at this point with regard to his ability to get anything done whatsoever, and basically stayed drunk all of the time. Rob?
Yeah, page 5, everybody. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to become a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hopes.
Okay, so liquor it became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. This is the progression of his alcoholism. At this point in time, he has no more choice anymore to whether to drink or not. He's drinking bathtub gin, which at the time was one of these things that people made during
Prohibition.
Prohibition. Thank you, sir. I was looking for that word. And it wasn't very good for you. There was a lot of impurities that were in this bathtub gin, and it really got to the point of really harming people at times if they didn't do it quite right with regard to their people's health. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bar and delicatessens. That's interesting that he would go out and pay off his places of drink first to make sure that he was able to continue his bad habit here. And nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. This is that great obsession that we have, that you can control your drinking like a normal person. I think, as Rob likes to say, if you're controlling your drinking, you're not having fun. And if you're having fun, you're not controlling your drinking. So this was not a fun time for Bill and or Lois, even though there were periods of sobriety or doing white knuckling, as we call it. It would just renew Lois's hope from time to time. But obviously he would go back and drink again. Rob?
Yeah, here Bill's in rough shape. Bathtub gin is not something that is for the faint of heart. You know, some people go blind from drinking some of this stuff. So, you know, you never knew exactly what you were getting at times. You know, it's like going to the drug dealer today and, you know, somebody ends up with fentanyl, you know, and they die. Here, bathtub gin, you know, people were making it in their actual bathtubs. And, you know, as I say, people went blind from this stuff. Moonshine. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished.
Yes, it did. We're talking about something going well for Bill, and he still is drinking heavily. A lot of times you think in terms of people at this point in time, and their life is fairly bleak. Things are broke. They've, you know, the father-in-law and Lois have become ill. The mother-in-law has died. The house has been taken over by the mortgage holder. You know, there's a lot to be to try and get back. You know, you would think that the direness of the situation would be motivating Bill, but nonetheless, as we as alcoholics know, that no matter how dire things get, it's hard to not drink. And going on this prodigious or big bender, and the chance vanished. He went through 3 days of drinking, and it was Applejack. It's called New Jersey Moonshine, known as Applejack. So that's what he was drinking, and that's what destroyed this deal that he had put together, and thought that this was going to end up doing quite well if things had gone well. Rob?
Yeah, and as Pete put in the chat, it's a malady. You know, we can't stop ourselves from taking that first drink. You know, they're just showing it here. Now, I'm going to read the next paragraph. I want you to notice how many times I is used for Bill. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I'd written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed, this time I meant business, and so I did. Shortly afterwards, I came home drunk. There'd be no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that.
Absolutely. And, you know, he finally recognizes that he has a problem. You know, I woke up, this had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. He is now at that point where he knows that things are not the way they should be. He was before he had written lots of sweet promises. He had taken the family Bible and had made promises to Lois that he would never drink again. And he was trying to do this on his own willpower, which we all know was not to be, because at this point you have no power over alcohol. And this is that first reference, if you will, to the fact that you're powerless over this and that you need something bigger than yourself in order to be able to stop. He actually doesn't want to drink, and he's baffled by that. It is just something that has got a hold of him. He's now tired of drinking. He's done drinking. He doesn't want to drink, yet he can't control it, and he is finding himself drinking. And he's baffled in this idea and the insanity of it. He's references as "was I crazy?" And certainly we would say that there's an insanity that goes with this whole situation. Rob?
Yeah. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then. And I did.
Yeah. So he doesn't understand alcoholism at this point. This whole idea that he can somehow control it is impossible. He's powerless over it. He's overconfident at this point because he's got a few days under his belt. And we've all been there. I can remember at my 2-week mark, I looked around and I was like, I've got this licked. There's no way I'm going to ever drink again. And not only did I have it licked, I expected everybody else to forgive me and everything to go back to normal. And this literally happened to me. And I got frustrated by the fact that nobody seemed to be ready to give me the credit that I had so thought I was so deserving of. But if you can imagine him walking into this cafe and make a telephone call, and then turns around, and as the whiskey, he just takes a drink and that's it. And he finds himself there drinking again. And he is like, what happened? Where had my resolve gone? And the frustration and the maddening situation that he was in would just have been just terrible. The malady had a hold on Bill, and he had his inability to not take that first drink. And the last but not least, the idea that you're already drunk or already drinking, so you might as well get drunk. That reference to that, I can tell you, I had gotten there a couple of times. It's like, okay, there's just no way I'm going to be able to control this, so I might as well get drunk, and I did. Exactly the same thing happening to me in a different scenario and different time, obviously, but can relate to that wholeheartedly. Rob?
Yeah. Do you want to? It is 12:54. Leo, you want to bring Mr. Bill in?
Yes, sir. You certainly do. It's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey.
Hey, Bill.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys. Good job there. This is a real good part of the book. I like this. The end of the doctor's opinion that we went through, they talk about Hank Parkhurst and Fitz Mayo. Basically, what you can call those are 2 case studies. Dr. Silkworth and his colleagues were studying these people. That's why he put that in here. That's basically a case study on what alcoholics do and how they can get better. And he's basically saying that the way that these 2 guys got better was they followed the program that was outlined in this book. And that's basically what Dr. Silkworth was doing. He was giving, recommendation for using this program because he saw it work with other people. Then we go into Bill's story. And I like Bill's story. Bill's story is one of the best stories in this book. As far as I'm concerned, it's the best story. What Bill's story actually is, it's a testimonial. He's giving testament on what happened to him. And the first part of his story is, if you want to call it a drunk-a-log, he's telling the story of how he got drunk. And you can see the progression in here. the things that he went through. He was trying not to drink at certain times, and it didn't do any good. Here's a guy, he went to law school, and he went to law school for a little over 3 years. He just didn't go there, and take like one night course. He went there for over 3 years, and it came down to his final exams. When you're going for your final exams for law school, that's a very, very important day in your life. And this guy could not stay sober on that day. Obviously, he didn't want to drink. He wanted to go take his exam and get his diploma or whatever they give you from there. And what did he do? He got so drunk that he couldn't think or write. So this is showing you where he was at. And the alcoholism is progressing. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And no matter what he tries to do, he always winds up drinking. He went and worked on a farm, and he stayed sober most of the time, but he got drunk a few times while he was working there also. So this was catching up with him. No matter what he tried to do, he was always winding up drinking sooner or later. Well, if you're an alcoholic, if you don't get a program or something under your belt, you don't get a higher power in your life and a program that can help you stay sober, sooner or later, you're going to drink. And it's just got different little stories in here, things that happened to him. He went all the way up to Canada, looking for a job because the stock market crashed in the United States, but it didn't crash up in Canada. And he had a friend up in Canada. He called him, and the guy offered him a job. He went up there, and he started doing real good. Everything was going great, and they were living in their accustomed style. Him and Lois were doing great up there. And what happens? He got drunk, and the guy had to let him go. It says he had to let him go. That's a nice way of saying he got fired. So that's basically what happened, because he was drinking, he got fired. Then he found a job, and he got in a brawl with a taxi driver. What happened here, he actually went to work. He was working for this place, and he got in a barroom brawl with the taxi driver. I know the way it's written in here, it's confusing. It sounds like he was in a taxi cab fighting with the guy. No, he was in a bar, and he got in a barroom brawl with a taxi driver, and somebody got the papers that he had with him in his pocket, and they got his work address and phone number, and they started calling him up at work and threatening him, and the place that he was working for found out about this, and they fired him because they didn't want, any kind of trouble. They figured he was a troublemaker and he was fighting with people. So, well, whatever was going on with Bill, however smart he was, every time he drank, he was starting to have a lot of trouble, and he was starting to get problems with it. And it talks about here bathtub gin. That's what they used to call stuff during Prohibition. Most of Bill Wilson's drinking was done during Prohibition. Prohibition went from 1920 to 1933. And that's when Bill did most of his drinking, when he was drunk most of the time, because he didn't get sober until 1934. December of 1934 is when he finally sobered up. So most of Bill's drinking in his war story, whatever you want to call it, took place during Prohibition. So he was drinking illegal alcohol most of the time. Whatever bathtub gin is, that's just a slang term for bootlegged alcohol or illegal alcohol. Sometimes they made it in bathtubs. Sometimes they made it in a still. Sometimes they got industrial alcohol and mixed it together with something else to flavor it. And like Rob pointed out, you don't know what you're getting. A lot of people would go blind from drinking this stuff because they would put rubbing alcohol in with it or whatever. These people that are selling stuff illegally, they don't have any kind of quality control on their stuff. So who knows what you're getting? So Bill was trying everything he could. He was trying to use his willpower, and he thought willpower was going to work. Sick 'em will, but that doesn't work for us, because once you're addicted to something, the addiction is in your brain, and that's where your willpower comes from. And the addiction shuts your willpower off, because the addiction is stronger than your willpower. So basically, Bill was trying to stay sober. He didn't want to drink, and he would drink anyway. He went to a cafe to make a phone call. What kind of a trigger is that, making a phone call? He's making a phone call, and he winds up drunk. He had no intention of getting drunk. He just went to make a phone call, and the next He's having those strange mental blind spots where he doesn't even think about what he's doing. He just grabs a drink and starts drinking it. And the next thing you know, he's blasted. Because once we take a drink, we activate the allergy, the phenomenon of cravings kicks in, and we can't stop. That's why it says he got good and drunk. And that's what he did. And basically that's what happened with Bill. It's showing you the progression of everything that he went through. And no matter how much he tried to stop, no matter how much willpower he used, and you can relate yourself to this, willpower is not going to work. Willpower doesn't work for our bodily functions. When something's going on with our body chemistry, you can't willpower it away. Try using willpower the next time you cut up a bunch of onions. Use willpower not to have your eyes water. There's a chemical reaction that takes place in your body, and you can't use your willpower to make it go away. And when it comes to alcoholism, we cannot use our willpower. That's why we need to go through this course of action and follow the instructions in this book. Thanks a lot for letting me share. That's all I got.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, Rob. Thank you, Bill. Let's go ahead and close out with the serenity prayer and then open things up.
You got it, Leo. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.